Well, welcome back once more, all my vintage dirt bike YouTubers, and thanks in advance for your continuing support of my classic dirt bike TV channel as we head towards the 9,000 subscriber total. Now, in my next featured clip, we're going to take a look at what is well accepted as a British classic among old motocross bikes. So I hope you'll stay with me for the next few minutes as we take a look at Albert Britton's 1959 Greeves Hawkstone 250. Now, the story of our particular machine actually begins when Albert's father bought this bike in 1963. Now, Albert's father bought this machine from another legendary Scottish rider called Willie Wallace, and this was when both Willie Wallace and Albert's father were both part of the Mercury Motorcycle Club in Glasgow. Now, the bike has been kept in the Britton family since 1963, and about 3 years back both Albert and his brother Gary did a complete restoration on the bike. Now, Gary decided to concentrate on the frame and all the other parts of the bike, while Albert set to work on restoring the Villiers motor. Now, these particular pictures and video clips were captured at the recent 2020 Scottish motorcycle show at Ingliston near Edinburgh. Now, the bike is a 1959 Greeves 250 Hawkstone, named naturally after that world famous Hawkstone Park motocross track in Shrewsbury in the UK. But of course, the actual story of how this bike became known as the Greeves Hawkstone is much more interesting. Now, in April 1957, motocross legend Brian Stonebridge went on to beat bigger 500cc bikes on this very small capacity Greeves machine around the demanding and hilly Hawkstone Park racetrack. Now, Brian went on to win the 350cc race and actually came second in the big 500cc class. Now, of course, this then established Greeves as a true off-road contender, and to celebrate this achievement, Bert Greeves then named his next Greeves motocrosser the Greeves Hawkstone, and it was around this time that Greeves then decided to specialise in building motocross machines. Now, the engine is a Villiers single cylinder 2-stroke with your standard 4-speed gearbox and a wet multiplate clutch. Now, these early Greeves machines used these Villiers engines, as of course Greeves was not yet manufacturing their own power plants at this time, although in the years to follow they would certainly create some iconic engines. Now, in standard trim, these Villiers gearboxes were pretty decent, although these Scrambles versions were upgraded to make the gearboxes tougher and to make them more robust for Scrambles use. Now, the complete bike took Gary and his brother Albert about a year to complete, and many of the parts they needed were sourced from a knowledgeable Greeves enthusiast from Essex in the UK, who had in his possession some new old stock parts from the original Greeves factory. Now, one of the improvements that many owners of these Greeves Hawkstones used to make is to cut away this rear section of the clutch casing to give them better access to the clutch cable. Now, as you would expect, these Villiers motors came from the factory with this casing fully intact, although Greeves owners tell me that this is extremely rare to find one of these Villiers motors with a casing complete, although there are a few that still enjoy having to remove the complete casing to access that clutch cable. Now, one of the more interesting features about these Greeves Hawkstones are this very radical leading link front suspension system. Now, it's certainly an unconventional method of securing and dampening the front wheel. It's held by these short leading links and pivots on these metallastic rubber and torsion mounts. And of course, dampening is controlled by fitting a pair of Girling shock absorbers up inside these down tubes. But of course, don't be fooled by this very radical suspension system. Back in 1959, these suspension systems worked extremely well, as of course was proven by the late Brian Stonebridge. Now, another innovation on these Greeves Hawkstones were these alloy paddle hubs, which of course are naturally designed to trap air and try and help to cool the brakes when they were being applied. Now, how efficient they were, I'm not entirely sure, but yet again, as you can see, more very radical thinking by those very talented Greeves engineers. Now, one of the other more outstanding features on this bike has to be this sandcast alloy front down tube eye section, which was a very radical design for the day. Now, as per the front wheel, the rear hub also has this paddle wheel style cooling fins for the rear brake, and very nice design when you consider this was 1959. Now, bolted on to the box section down tube of the alloy frame was a simple and very light tubular subframe. Now, the rear swing arm on these Greeves in 1959 was also widened to allow the use of a much wider 4-inch knobbly tyre. But of course, these Greeves Hawkstones are just testament to Bert Greeves and his company, who of course started out by building invalid motor cars for people with disabilities, and then moved on to manufacturing these wonderful old classic motorcycles. Now, as far as I'm aware, most of these hand controls on the bike, I'm not entirely sure if these are originals from back in the day, because these handlebars certainly look very different from some of the other handlebars I've seen on these old Greeves Hawkstones. But then again, what do I know? I could be totally wrong in that respect, but I do know that the bike has had a new set of Venhill cables and a new replacement throttle gasser. Now, although the bike may have one or two non-original parts on it from 1959, it's not such a big deal really, as of course many of these older classics often didn't have all their original parts on their machines, and that was even after, of course, a full restoration. Now, another quite surprising thing was that these Greeves Hawkstones came straight from the factory with this single down tube exhaust megaphone system. Now, this metal chain guard system was also a factory fitted item when these bikes left the manufacturer in 1959. Now, the Villiers engine had this Amal concentric carburetor with that paper cartridge type screw-on air filter. But these Villiers two-stroke motors were very good for their time and reasonably reliable, and performed very well sitting inside this Greeves Hawkstone chassis. But we should never underestimate the influence that the late Brian Stonebridge gave to the Greeves factory in its early days, because it was because of his major successes at Hawkstone Park that day that really did put Greeves on the world motocross map. Of course, ironically, Brian was tragically killed in 1959 after a road accident when he was in a car driven by his then boss at the time, Bert Greeves. And of course, without Brian Stonebridge's successes, this particular machine naturally would never have been manufactured. Although despite how odd some people might say that this bike looks, make no mistake, in 1959 these were very competitive machines when the likes of the legendary Brian Stonebridge was in the pilot seat. Now, Brian most definitely secured the Greeves name into the motocross history books with his amazing performance at Hawkstone Park on that day in 1957, when these Hawkstone 250s were beating much larger and much better bikes on the day. So there you have it, a very nice old classic built by Albert and Gary Britton. That's a lovely 1959 Greeves Hawkstone 250. Anyhow, there are more of these iconic motocross classics waiting to be featured here on my channel, so if these are the type of motorcycles that you enjoy looking at, then please continue to subscribe to my channel to see more of these iconic classic motocross machines. This video was brought to you in association with WorldSport, the world's #1 supplier for all your off-road and leisure sportswear. Just visit their online website for more information.